Is there a solution that you can see to the issues that men are facing in the sort of modern world, where suicide rates are through the roof, loneliness, depression?
Look, the solution for men is always going to be the same, which is to be better, to do better, to work harder, to learn skills, to grow, to develop, to look for mentors, to look for guidance, and to do things. It's always going to be the way. Like I said, no one's coming to save you. And this is why victimhood that we talked about earlier, it's especially bad for men, because, we feel sorry for women. We don't really feel sorry for men, right? So if a woman is a victim, everyone wants to go and help her and support her, and it's natural and understandable. There's a very good evolutionary reasons for this, I think, which is men are biologically disposable, basically. If you have a tribe of 10 men, 10 women, you send the men off to war, one comes back, you can replenish the tribe. And that's one very lucky dude. If you do it the other way around and you send the women off to war, you're screwed, right? And so men are kind of disposable. We didn't evolve to feel sorry for them. And so for guys, again, you just got to do stuff and be better. And yes, you've been dealt a bad hand. You have, compared to the previous generations where men were in charge and all of that. You're going to have to find a way.
And wokeism and sort of, I guess, political correctness and cancel culture and all these things are much of the weapons that are used to put men in those situations, you would argue.
Yeah. But, I think I always worry when we have these conversations that to say that men, young men especially, younger than me, I think, have a bad deal is often like people try and immediately shove you in some kind of box, like you're some men's rights, blah, blah, blah. I just think that's an observable fact. And the reason I think it's important is that men and women need to work together. Mm-hmm. Men and women have had to work together for the entire history of human existence. One of the terrible things about wokeness is that it creates these divisions between men and women. Men are this, women are that. And you see the response to that from the aggressive masculine side. Now, women are all this and women are all that. Actually, the thing that men and women really need, more than anything, is each other. They need to work together. That operates at the level of your relationship with your girlfriend, my wife, but broader society too. We have different skill sets. We are naturally inclined to do different things. We have to find ways to work together better. And so when one side suffers, there was a time when women were treated very badly. A lot of them. That wasn't good. Treating men badly isn't going to work out well either. What you really need is finding ways for men and women to be healthy together in relationships. And so that's, I think, important to say that that's the objective. If that's the goal, if that's the objective that we're holding up, then the question is, how do we get there? And the answer to that is not to point fingers at the other sex and say they are this and they are that, but to go, well, men are naturally aggressive and dominant and status-seeking and all of this stuff, and let's find ways to channel that into effective things. We need guys to stand on construction sites and hammer shit into the ground and all of that. And we need women to do other things that are more natural to them. I mean, look, once you have a kid and you start taking them to nursery, you find out that, there is no gender equality in a kindergarten. It's mostly women that run that place, and that's the way it should be, and that makes sense. So we have different inclinations, different skill sets. It's not to say there aren't exceptions of course there are, right? But generally speaking, we need to work together. That's the point.
Yeah, I think even mentioning that there might be biological differences in male and female is where people like those that are looking for
they need to man up.
Whataboutery, they come out in full arms. But I think anyone in their private relationship can very clearly state the differences between men and women. And as you say, they're not sweeping, and there are exceptions.
But how beneficial, I don't know anything about you. We've just met. But I imagine your girlfriend's been instrumental in your life. Would that be fair to say?
Of course.
I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am without my wife. And we both reap the benefits of that. I'm sure that's the case with you. That's how it's supposed to work, on an individual level and at the level of society. Holding each other up, filling in gaps. The first time, I remember, something, when I was young, when I was about 20, full of testosterone, I remember watching my mum resolve a conflict with a joke and a smile. And to me, it was like magic. I was like, whoa, you can do that? And then that was a helpful thing for me to learn, But in my masculine boarding school kind of environment, you'd never do that, right? It was all about who can like win and fight and dominate and whatever. We're useful to each other. We can learn from each other. That's the attitude that we should have towards each other and the other sex.
I love the term you used there when you said "hold me up," because that's exactly what my partner does for me.
Right.
And I think she'd probably say the same for her,
Sure.
which I think goes to your point about what it should be. This sort of mutual.
We
support.
fill in the blanks in each other's maps of the world, in emotional states. There's certain emotional states that I find very hard to get out of. My wife can come in and be like, boom, 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 done, and vice versa, right? And they're not the same. We've been told the lie that men and women are the same.
What
We're
about
not the same.
problematic men like Harvey Weinstein and stuff? Like
Yeah, terrible, of course.
the whole Me Too movement exposed this wave of like. Someone on my podcast said, it was the neuroscientist in America. He said, we've called men out, but we need to make sure we call them back in, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, I think the mistake we made was we called men out instead of calling toxic men out. In the same way that people who are critical of women now, they will point to certain female traits or certain female people who behave in ways that are very toxic, and they will broaden and generalize from that onto all women, right? Harvey Weinstein does not represent me. In fact, throughout history, people like him would have actually been dealt with by good men and prevented from acting in that way, right?
I guess the argument is that it is all men because you're having those conversations in your group chat and you're not checking your friend or your, I don't know, Harvey's friends didn't check him.
What kind of group chats are you reading?
This is what I see online is like.
Right. But
gotta check
that
your-
makes absolutely zero sense. This is the thing, is like, if you want to generalize about an entire group of people, generally speaking, we think that's a bad thing to do. Like, if you were to do that about Pakistanis, people wouldn't be into that, right? If I was to do that about black people, nobody would be into that. But the moment it's men, suddenly that's totally cool. Now we're going to do this? Doesn't make any sense.
Free speech is at the heart of this, right? Because we're talking about social media platforms, the ability to express ideas and not be scared. Free speech has been on a bit of a journey over even the last 10 years. I think if you just looked at where we were 10 years ago and then 5 years ago and then the pandemic and then now, it feels like all four of those moments were in a different place. What's your observation of that story arc of free speech?
Well, it's all very contextual, right? And depends where you are, what you do, and what your opinions are. One thing people forget, give you one brief example, right? Because a lot of people make free speech a political issue. They say, well, this side cares about it because they want to say their stuff, and this side doesn't care about it because blah, 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 right? During the pandemic, when the vaccine came out in America, the person who was pushing the vaccine was Donald Trump. And people who were opponents of his on the left said, I'm not taking Trump's vaccine, blah, 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 right? The moment the presidency changed, suddenly you couldn't criticize the vaccine, right? And suddenly, you wanted to kill people if you had some reservations about some things about it, right? So free speech usually, and always has been really, is a weapon that people like to use against the other side, which is why you need people in the middle to kind of be the referee and say, guys, I don't care which one of you is in power now. We always need free speech so that we can criticize the people in power, not the right or the left, but the people in power, whoever that is. Now, from about 2014 onwards, particularly, I think there was a lot of restriction of speech from the left, from the progressive left. And that was part of wokeness. And by the way, just for your audience, I think it might be helpful. I always say this because people don't know this, where the term political correctness comes from. People think political correctness is, let's not be mean to people, let's not offend minorities, let's not make offensive jokes, blah, blah, blah. Never had anything to do with that. Political correctness was invented in the Soviet Union by communists so that they could say to critics of the communist regime, well, comrade, what you're saying may be factually correct, but it's politically incorrect, and therefore you should shut up. In other words, it's inconvenient to the party line of the day. And that's how political correctness is used always. It's about preventing you from expressing a dissenting opinion. So from 2016 onwards, you saw lots of that, especially on social media, because the kind of progressive left had a lock on all of those institutions. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we can go down the full list. They pandered. I'm not saying the people who ran them were themselves necessarily woke, but they pandered and appeased that fringe who said, you can't say that, that's hate speech, you can't say that, that's blah, blah, blah. And during the pandemic, we saw real restrictions on it. I understand why. The pandemic killed a hell of a lot of people. There was a hell of a lot of lies being told by people of all different sides. I was uncomfortable with the level of censorship we saw, though. I thought that a lot of very reasonable things were prevented from being talked about. One of them was where the virus came from. We now know with almost certainly it came from a lab in China due to almost certainly gain-of-function research. Matt Ridley, for example, is in the House of Lords in the UK, so he's not some fringe random guy. Wrote a whole book with a Chinese scientist, Alina Chan, I think her name is. We've had him on the show to talk about this. If you'd said that on social media in the early days of the pandemic, you would have been banned. Now we know that's almost certainly what happened, and it's really important where the virus came from for obvious reasons, which is if it came from a lab where these people were messing around with viruses, don't we want to know that? Because it could happen again, right? So the restriction of free speech is dangerous for all sorts of reasons. And then Elon Musk bought Twitter. And I think since then we've seen that, a friend of mine's very fond of saying that 0 is a special number. And what he means by that is when you control every single media outlet in the world of that type, social media, you are able to censor everything. But the moment one of those outlets is not controlled by you, censorship becomes pointless because people can go to the other platform and see the things for themselves, right? Which is one of the reasons Mark Zuckerberg has come out recently and said that they were wrong to ban Donald Trump from Facebook and Instagram, and they were wrong to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story and all of that kind of stuff, and that they wouldn't do so again. Because now that there is a platform where that censorship is not happening, he looks kind of bad in this whole thing, right? So I think Elon buying Twitter and opening up the range of conversations has had some very positive effects. It's also had some negative effects, undoubtedly. And that is a thing that, I think a great engineer like Elon will hopefully fine-tune over time.
What is the negatives of?
Well, look, the amount of horrific shit that people say on there now is increased exponentially, undoubtedly, right? And the answer to that might not be that they need to be banned or censored. It might be what he said originally. He talked about freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. Like, maybe, my view as someone from a Jewish background is I don't want people being banned from social media for being anti-Semitic. But should they be promoted actively on social media for being anti-Semitic? Should we flood the internet with that? Maybe not. Maybe they can say what they want, but maybe it shouldn't be to the broadest possible audience or whatever it looks like, right? I don't think we want a space where people are encouraged to be hateful, and it sometimes does feel like that on social media. One of the big problems is, of course, anonymity, right? It's like that windscreen effect in the car. You get in your car, someone cuts you up in traffic. The things you do and say are not the things you would say to someone face to face. And if you have complete online anonymity, it encourages people to be the worst version of themselves. How you resolve that, we don't know. It's a complicated problem. I mean, social media is a giant conundrum. Personally, I am still, despite all that horrible shit, on the side of the opening up is good. We don't want people being banned for expressing the wrong opinion about, the pandemic, the vaccine, the whatever, unless they're really being nefarious. There's a balance to be found. We haven't found it yet.
When you look at all solutions as just having trade-offs,
yeah.
I think it makes it a lot easier to accept that we'll never be happy with this. And if you arrive at that position, then maybe...
That's a Thomas Sowell line, by the way.
Oh, is it actually?
Yeah. Man, you would love his books, I promise you.
I've written his name down, so I'm going to have to dig in. And everything you said, I have seen. So I've seen a rise in commentary that I think has really been beneficial. And I've also seen the N-word more times on my timeline than I ever would have seen before, or horrific stuff. So the idea of freedom of speech but not freedom of reach might be the best solution.
And look, it's a terrible thing to say, but maybe the trade-off of a free society is some people are going to say things you and I both really don't like, The question is, should they be front and center of the biggest social media platform in the world? Maybe not. But as I say, I think it's a technical issue. And as you say, there are trade-offs to both ways of handling it. I believe that social media is a very new thing. We will find a solution. It's going to take some time. I just hope it doesn't break our brains in the meantime.
If we look forward 5, 10, 20 years, do you think the West will still be dominant?
I think in that timeline, yes, because the accumulated advantage we have is very significant. But you know that thing about how did something end gradually and then suddenly? We're not on a good trajectory. And, when we talk about, the decline of the West, people imagine and then one day everybody died. This is not what I'm talking about. But have you been to Rome?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you been to Athens?
No.
Okay, well, they're the same thing. You walk out of the tube station in central Rome and you see this Colosseum. And it's incredible. And you think, what an amazing civilization. And then you look around and there's Italians and they're wonderful people and they have a great time and whatever. But those are not the same thing. The Roman Empire and Italy are not the same thing. Great civilizations come to an end. And they come to an end when they decide they are no longer willing to fight for their future.
And what does that mean in reality if it comes to an end? As in, if the West becomes, secondary to China or Russia, what does that mean for me and you?
Decline in living standards. We are going to be dictated to by other countries in the way that we currently dictate to them what they should do, what they shouldn't do, where they can have their power centers, where they can't. It will mean that our children are not as prosperous and not as free as you and I have been. And it will mean that the values of the West, which are ironically the things that woke people care about so much, human rights, equality of treatment, all of those things will fall to the wayside because, in Russia or China, the attitude to gay people or ethnic minorities is nothing like what we have here. And so that's what I keep trying to say to people. Like, look, I agree with you when you say, we need to treat people of different backgrounds equally and we need to be fair and we need to be kind to people. If that's what you care about, the thing you should really, really do is do everything you possibly can to save the West. Because the moment the West is not dominant, those values will not be considered values at all.
What could I do to save the West? Okay, remove the podcast.
Okay.
Stephen, before the podcast, what could I do as an individual listening to this to save the West?
Teach your children how lucky they are. Take them abroad. Show them the rest of the world. Show them what people live like in poor countries around the world and remind them how fortunate they are and then explain to them where it all comes from. And it comes from the fact that we have developed, designed, invented, found the magic formula for human society, or at least the best one that humans have invented so far. Freedom of expression, freedom of research, freedom of speech, capitalism, private property, the rule of law, and the idea that we talked about religion. I think it comes largely from Christianity, that we all have dignity by virtue of being human. Those are the things that have driven our society to the tremendous success we have, to the technological progress. People don't realize that, but without freedom of research, freedom of expression, you don't have the technological progress that we have, and then you don't have the dominance that we enjoy, because our dominance is almost entirely based on the technological progress. We're not the most populous civilization in the world. We don't have the largest number of people. We are prosperous because of our technological advantages, and they come from the incredible opportunities that people have to research things, to make things, and then to profit from them in a way that they don't have in other societies. Teach your children that their society is great. Teach them that they live in one of the best places in the history of the world, that all the bullshit they're being taught at school is not true. Inoculate them against these ideas. My parents had to do this with me. When I was growing up in the Soviet Union, before my first day at school, they said two things. First, do not ever discuss anything we talk about in the home at school, because we'll all be in trouble. And two, they're going to teach you this, 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 and this. This is not true. That's fine. You don't have to argue with your teacher. Just know that it's not true. Here's why it's not true. If you have any questions, talk to us. You have to inoculate your children against this stuff, and then they will be good citizens. Then they will create things of value to the society, and they will spread that message to others.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.